Hello, everyone. I'm Peter McMillan, the Executive Officer at NT Shelter. We're coming to you today from the lands of the Larrakia people. I pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and to any other First Nations people who might be watching on this podcast. This is episode 3 of Sharing the Couch. It's a new initiative at NT Shelter where we get to talk with people across the housing and homelessness sector, both in the Northern Territory and elsewhere. And it's an opportunity really to hear from those people who are leading from the front in terms of making a difference in the housing and homelessness space, making a difference for people who need assistance, the most vulnerable people. And if you would like to make sure you don't miss out on these episodes, then check out our YouTube channel just by Googling NT Shelter YouTube, and you could subscribe and follow the series as we go. We have got a lot of really exciting presenters and speakers coming up that we're looking forward to talking, and certainly one of them is with us today. So I'd like to introduce Brent Warren. Brent is the Deputy Chief Executive of Housing Operations at Northern Territory Government. Brent's an executive leader with experience in law enforcement, youth justice, social and affordable housing, child protection and family support. This includes extensive experience leading and championing the implementation of reform initiatives in key operational areas. Brent has led regional service delivery arrangements and has lived and worked across the Northern Territory. He brings strong working relationships with key government agencies and community organisations and experience in leading emergency management response, policy development, stakeholder liaison, human resource management and research and analysis. Brent's had a very interesting history of education as well and roles, and we'll go through some of that shortly. Brent, welcome to the program. Thanks for coming.
Thanks very much, Peter. I appreciate the opportunity to be on the couch today.
No worries at all. We're looking forward to the conversation. So, Brent, maybe we can just start in terms of me clarifying. Are you a Territory boy born and bred, or did you move to Territory when you were young?
Yeah, so not quite born and bred. We came up to the Territory as a family when I was 5 or 6. Came up from Victoria, and standard sort of NT story. We were here for a 2-year deployment to Nhulunbuy, which stretched out to about 7 years in the end. With my dad working for what was Telecom back then. Okay. And my mum was a nursing aide, so she took up some work at the hospital. So, yeah, not quite born and bred, but I did do my schooling in the Northern Territory, so I figure that's a close second place.
I think that almost qualifies you, Brent, as a true Territorian, as they say, for sure. So when you were going through school over in Nhulunbuy, I guess you went through high school, you were thinking about what you were wanting to do with your career, and you went to Charles Darwin University and did law and business. What was going through your mind there? I mean, you would have had a lot of options, obviously, as to what you wanted to study, and what attracted you towards the law?
It's a good question, and actually when I was finishing high school, I got seduced by the idea of engineering initially before law, and I had aspirations that I might go to the Defence Force Academy and study engineering as part of that kind of program. A few mates and I had the same idea. The mates all got into the Defence Force Academy, but they told me that I needed some more life experience, so I went off and actually tried civil engineering at Sydney University for a year and didn't enjoy that very much and didn't do very well. So came back to the Territory and decided to jump across into law. And ironically, I'd probably always known that I enjoyed the human services, the humanities subjects a lot more in high school. So I probably ended up doing what I should have done initially, if that makes sense.
Sure.
But yeah, just always really attracted to I guess the structure and the problem solving of legal study. It was, I really enjoyed getting into that.
It's interesting because when I think of police and policing, I don't typically think of government because I see government more as, I guess, the bureaucracy or the administrative side. But absolutely, it's public service, isn't it, at its core? And I guess the notion of to protect and to serve the community, that must be something that you see not only in the police force but in your current role as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's obviously a separation between what the police do, just in terms of the legal difference, but I think that attitude of getting out and being there to work for the community keep the community safe in one form or another absolutely translates into the public service. And I think it's something I've enjoyed in the public service setting is just really seeing the different ways that people subscribe to that service mentality. Even I think people that are really well versed in what they're here for and what their department does, they can find that service in a back office job, in a processing role where they can really link their part of the business to the business of serving the community. And I've really enjoyed working in Territory Families Housing Community, seeing the different ways that people connect their work to the broader service. So yeah, it is transferable.
And how did you get into the force? So you've completed a degree, and I know you've continued on with a lot of other academic programs as well in leadership and in international relations as well. You've got an MBA and a master's from Cambridge in applied criminology and police management. So obviously that area of policing and criminology was of interest. How did you go from, being in a law degree, where I guess a lot of people would go into the law and be a solicitor or a barrister? You've gone, into the police direction. How did that come about?
It sounds like it should be a noble story, but it's really not. I ended up I started my degree full time and ended up being a part-time student and a part-time worker. Tried a couple of the standard post high school roles. I ran a fast food shop for a little while and worked as a clerk in a law firm, because I think that was me thinking that law training was going to take me in that direction. And then kind of by accident fell into policing. There was a recruiting round and I was looking for something different. And I actually had intended to apply in the police auxiliary stream and just kind of do that as an adjunct to my study. But a member of my family said to me, "Oh, why don't you try as a constable as well, or instead?" And I did that, and it turned out that they took me in. And so I think from there, I kind of realised once I was in the work just how much of a connection there was. And yeah, look, I think as a very junior police officer, I wasn't always clear how the legal training in terms of university study matched up. But it absolutely did, in that I think what I've taken in my legal studies is problem solving and structured thinking, and that's hugely valuable in a policing context. Working through, sifting through competing evidence in an inquiry, or even when you start to think about policy development, what are the different issues that we're trying to tackle as a government or a police service, and how do you match them together in a sensible way, a coherent way that people can read and understand easily. So, yeah, I guess that's kind of where the legal training fitted into the accidental policing.
Right. Well, that's very interesting. And, I guess in terms of then getting into the education realm and continuing on with your studies, a lot of people would have completed an undergraduate degree and left it at that, and you've gone and done a lot of other study. Obviously, education is valuable in your mind and important to you. Do you want to talk a little bit about what the thinking was there? Because it's a big commitment to do all the study that you've done.
Yeah, look, thanks for the question. It is something that I've really been passionate about, is just lifelong learning. It did take me, it took me 9 years in the end to finish my undergraduate degree program whilst I was working at the same time. So that was a bit of a strain once I got into my policing career. But I think, yes, I've just always felt that we have to know more about the world around us to do what we do more effectively. And I think one of the things I like to remind myself about is how little I usually know about a subject, and how important it is to go and find the people that do know, whether that's someone who's done academic research on an issue, whether it's someone who's got lived experience as a victim, if it's a practitioner in a sector organisation that's actually been doing this particular kind of work and has this particular experience. So, yeah, I think it's just about making sure that we constantly check ourselves about how much there is to learn out there. And for me, I just find the structure of a university program keeps me honest and makes me stay on track. and it's harder to get kind of distracted and flick around all over the place with different lines of thinking. But yeah, probably the study that was most fascinating for me was when I got the opportunity to go over to Cambridge. They have a police-focused program that's about criminology, and a great colleague of mine, Jeanette Kerr, had taken the program a couple of years before me, and she recommended it to me and gave me some information about pathways to get onto the program, which worked out quite well. So that was a chance to go to one of the most famous universities in the world, and even just wandering around the place was, that was a memory I'll never forget. But meeting a range of colleagues who are doing similar kinds of work, but from all sorts of different places, gives you that chance to just check in about, yes, there's differences in the work we might do in the territory, but there's so much of it that's actually going on in other bigger jurisdictions and in other parts of the world. So, yeah, it's good to get that reality check about what's different and what's similar, just with different people in different parts of the world.
And I guess it's interesting, having done international relations as well prior to that, and then going to Cambridge, it must kind of be formative in terms of the way you look at have a worldview, and maybe think about what's happening in other places and how we can apply that in Australia.
Yeah, certainly. I think it's easy to get stuck in what we do every day and get really focused in the daily news cycle and the very localized things that we might be talking about, but we miss the opportunity to learn from other people and see similar work going on elsewhere. So yeah, international relations study for me, a big part of my interest there was about understanding the international bodies that are thinking about and supporting service to communities. The United Nations, for example, that structure has a whole lot of not just service organisations under them, but actually, international covenants, legal arrangements, best practice thinking about what should be in our mind when we're thinking about how to support people. And there's always points of application. I think about the fact that, we're in different parts of my career, I've been working with children at risk, and, there's international guidance about how to support young people. There's all sorts of guidance about how to work with First Nations people, and all sorts of information and guidance there about things like what are the minimum expectations for people in terms of access to shelter, access to support and education from the government, and just really thinking, have I checked everywhere when I'm trying to find out information?
Absolutely. And Brent, speaking of territory families, so you were commander with Northern Territory Police Emergency Fire and Emergency Services in Darwin. I know that you're involved from a law enforcement perspective with some of the issues that were going on around Darwin and kids. There's, for people who are interested, there's still a video online of you in uniform speaking about 5 kids, I think, that stole cars, or 5 cars were stolen a little way back, and a little bit of mischief on your hands there to deal with, no doubt. And then you went across and took on that role in youth protection and those, I guess, those executive roles within territory families. There are some similarities there, I think, in terms of probably that crisis management and dealing with issues very much in real time and having to put out a lot of, I guess, challenges of the day. Do you think your service in the force has been helpful in allowing you to respond to what's a very difficult area, obviously, in child protection and territory families generally? Do you think those skills have been transferable and helpful?
Yeah, look, I do, and I think you're right. It's about there's that underlying issue about crisis management or issue and response that comes up, and policing is definitely not unique in that. I think I did get a great opportunity to sort of practice and refine those skills in a policing context, and I think what really was part of my learning in the last few years in police was just being so explicitly clear about how much of that work involved vulnerable clients who are also in other parts of our broader system response. And I spent a lot of time, probably over the last 4 or 5 years in my policing career, interacting really closely with child protection workers, interacting really closely with the Department of Education, and working with some parts of the non-government sector who were directly involved in providing services. I've often enjoyed sharing the story that when I was working in Alice Springs with police, the first time I met previous Minister Dale Wakefield was when she was the CEO of the shelter down there.
All right.
And she was ringing up to let me know that we were dealing with a complaint between some of my police staff and some of her social work staff. And we both had a laugh together about the sort of entrenched cultures of the two organisations, and it always really pleased me to think that she was successful in working with us because she could see both points of view, and I've tried to emulate that empathy, I guess, for what the different organisations involved in our sector work have to go through, and where their staff are coming from in their experience with our clients. So
yeah, it's so important, that word empathy, and I guess open-mindedness too. It's interesting, and we'll get to your current role in a bit more detail in a moment, but just in terms of attitudes in the Northern Territory, everyone seems to have an opinion on what needs to be done to address antisocial behaviour or crime, or kids that might be running amok in Alice Springs from time to time. Everyone seems to have, and they can be quite strong responses, and often a punitive response. So I guess it's interesting, isn't it, that if we have an open mind as to what some approaches to those things are, we can maybe get better outcomes if we've got that open mindedness and if we've got that empathy.
Yeah, definitely. And I think always reminding ourselves that there's humans at the centre of the story, usually humans that are a part of a family unit somewhere along the way, and that family unit's usually got similar expectations and aspirations to everyone else around being sort of safe and secure and thriving. So it is just important to always see every point of view, and I think it often presents a different solution that may not have been visible if you come in from a single service or a single focus point of view. So that's something that I was really attracted to in my policing time, working in what was then called the Interagency Tasking and Coordination Group, which was a model that was set up to make sure that different departments of government sat down regularly and met and talked about key issues for their regional and remote community, right. and included feedback from the community itself to make sure that we were focusing on the right priorities and that we were understanding how the community wanted us to respond. I was really fortunate when I was working in the Big Rivers area to get tasked to go and help set up one of those committees out in Borroloola. Right. Actually, I think we set them up in a few places, but Borroloola always sticks in my mind because we went out telling the community and the key groups out there, we want to set up this group so that we can work with you to kind of make this a better place. And we had in our mind that they might want to talk about things like break-ins or antisocial behaviour. And what they actually wanted to talk to us about was young people attending school. Right. And I kind of went, oh, okay, that's not exactly what I thought I'd be in here chairing a conversation about. But when we got down to it, the community perceived that they needed more help to get kids into the school environment and for them to stay there. And so we had this whole different approach where we were actually helping with visits to houses to get kids up and out to school in the morning, that we're making sure that the school was a safe environment during the day, and just really working in a different area than I had anticipated because we opened our mind up to what everyone else actually was thinking.
And Brent, as a police officer, a person with empathy and I guess an open mindedness to different perspectives and how to I guess work through issues. How do you reconcile those what appear to me to be competing objectives between having to enforce the law when there is a need to go in and take action when the law has been broken, versus, I guess, working with the community and helping coach and assist them as you've just described? Because it seems like they're two potentially contradictory or two tensions within the role. You've got to enforce, and people know that the police are coming, maybe I'm in trouble, versus the police are coming, they're here to help.
I think it is a real challenge, and it's not restricted to the world of policing. I have to say that different parts of government have got statutory obligations that they have to fulfil. If you think about the world of child protection, or if you think about even the world of liquor licensing, those kind of things, there's always a accountability and enforcement component somewhere. My view is that what we need to keep doing is, if we're empathetic and thinking where are the other people coming from here, have we communicated effectively what's going on and why we're unhappy with the situation? That's always a huge factor in getting a good outcome. If there are always rules and expectations, and it doesn't matter if you're talking about a legal setting or just community expectations or cultural expectations. There's always rules and expectations and accountabilities. And the more that we talk to each other about making sure everyone knows what those accountabilities are and what we need to do to make things right, I think the more that people are satisfied with a process. And this same logic applies even if you're working inside an organisation, working in say a HR context where you're needing to work with employees that might, there may be a disciplinary infraction, or there may be some kind of disagreement between staff. It always comes down to communicating really well, listening really well, and making sure that everyone's been heard, so that when we get to the end of a process, everyone knows that they got heard and got listened to, and they then understand why the decision makers got to their final decision.
Right. Yep. No, fair enough. And then you get the call, presumably, to say that, look, we've got a role in Territory Families, which has incorporated housing and a number of other areas as well. A big agency that you're part of, an even bigger agency than it was before. And you get the call, presumably, saying, look, you're the guy we want to be heading up the Deputy CEO of Housing Operations. So what was going through your mind when you got that call?
Yeah, probably a few different things simultaneously. What do they say about holding opposite competing ideas in your head all at once?
Yeah.
Look, I have to be really honest. My first thought was that's an area of government that I don't have a lot of direct experience in. That was my first thought, and then I stopped and kind of reconsidered in terms of the roles I've had and the clients that I've worked with and the situations they were coming from. And actually, I've spent a lot of time working with people that have got a connection to the public housing system. For, I guess, in the different places I've worked within government, when you're in a place where you're working with vulnerable clients, sadly, a lot of those clients are also accessing public housing network as part of the support system that's there to help them. And so there's actually a connection there. Then when you start to think about the research that we see from around the world about the value of safe and secure housing and the trajectories that can follow for people, whether they have that type of accommodation or not. And actually, it's really obvious that a lot of the kind of secondary and tertiary work that government and NGOs do with clients is all linked somewhere back to the housing system. So I think I got to that point eventually, but yeah, definitely the first response was, oh, okay, that's a turn to the left that I wasn't expecting to make. But it's been a ripper journey since then. I think I can still acknowledge that there's so much I don't know about the housing system. I'm still learning every day, but I've been really pleased with how open everyone in the sector, both in the government and in the NGO sector, have been about kind of educating and bringing me along on the journey. and making sure that I knew what their point of view was about their part of the service system. So,
Great.
so it's been a different direction, but lots of similarities in the way that you might run or put together a big system, and the opportunities there are when you bring different service streams together in a larger organisation. I think there's definitely been some wins for clients when we've started to look at people who might be living in a public housing context, who might also have family support requirements, who may be dealing with youth issues in their family network or in their family in a home, and actually going, have we thought about all of those issues together? And have we thought about what order in which we should tackle them? Because in the past, we may have tackled the housing tenancy issue first, when actually maybe we shouldn't tackle that first. We should tackle it second, after we've done something else that sets that family up a bit stronger. We've also been able to use the housing system to support people who might have normally come to our attention in other parts of our system, and the fact that we're able to manage the tenancy arrangements for our clients means that we can help them make decisions about different accommodation that actually might better suit their circumstance. And we've been able to help people perhaps manage the pressures of external family by changing residences, for example, so that they're able to succeed with other issues that they're working on to do with their health or with their family. So, there's a lot of connections once you start to look into it, and a lot of synergies for us in this agency with the different streams of work that we do here.
Fantastic. It's not an easy gig, housing and homelessness, and neither were the previous roles you've taken on. And I'd imagine there's a fair element of dealing with, the day-to-day crisis as well in housing. It's a very operational role. Is that something that you relish? You're looking for those kind of roles where you're able to, I guess, look at responding to whether it be an emergency or something pressing operationally. There have to be a lot of that element to the role.
There certainly is. I'm not sure whether I relish it and go looking for it, or if it just seems to come to me. There's a word for people that have that experience. It's probably not a podcast.
I remember with some roles, you've got the reading on your back shelf, and you're thinking, I'm going to get to that. I really want to read and learn, and I think that's important I do that. But the day never seems to come. It's a bit like that for you.
Yeah, absolutely. I in my mind, I really find it important to get into the detail and understand the theory that sits behind the things that we do. And I spend a fair bit of time doing that in this role, but it always feels like it's not enough. I always feel like I'd like to know a bit more, a bit deeper. But I guess the challenge is to make sure that you trust the people that work around you, whether they're sector partners or whether they're leaders within your team who are doing specific bits of technical work. You have to have a high level of trust that people are working with you, they're working for the right reason, and they've got more expertise than you in the work they do. And being able to let them feel safe enough to share their ideas and their points of view, but also giving them the benefit of me being the kind of accountable officer on those bigger decisions. So, I always wish that I could spend a bit more time sort of reaching in and playing with the detail. But you're right, it is a busy operational role. It's a busy operational agency, actually, if I could say that. And my colleagues spend as much time as I do kind of dealing with the here and now, as well as planning for the future. And I guess you don't realise till you've been in it for 1 year or 10 years or 20 years, depending on which colleagues you're talking to, that operational doing work actually builds up just as much important knowledge and experience as the things in the books on the shelf in the back of the office do. And we need to make sure we value that kind of lived practical experience. I think I learned a phrase when I was doing some uni study, pracademic. People who like to or who have some theoretical grounding, but who are actually using their theory in practice in an operational world. And I like to think that we've got a bunch of pracademics working in the department who've got some strong theoretical underpinnings, but are also out there testing things out knowing that there will be mistakes or errors sometimes, because when you're testing out new things, they don't always work. Knowing that they've got the opportunity to recognise when it's not working right and change course and get on with it again. I think that's a really important thing for an operational team, to know that you can't spend forever getting something perfect. You've got to make calls and get started. And then sometimes we have to recalibrate or adjust slightly once we're off on the mission, to make sure that we've acknowledged new information that's come to light. So, yeah. It's
very interesting. Yeah, absolutely. And when you came into your role, you've got a pretty big team working in housing operations. And what did you find? What were your initial impressions of the group that you were leading?
Look, I think I was really, really lucky. I've got a strong group of people that have got a combined total of lots and lots of experience running a housing system. We've got people across our regional centres in the housing network who've been doing this work for a long time. We're blessed with some people in our regional offices who've got lots of remote experience, so working in the running of public housing in remote Aboriginal communities, as well as in the bigger urban centres. We've got some people that have got deeper policy knowledge. We've also got people that have got sector knowledge, who've worked in the sector and jumped back and forth between the government and the NGO world. So we've got, I guess I call them interpreters, people that make sure that we hear the message properly and that make sure our message gets shared back across in the way that it's intended, which is really, really powerful. And then the other thing is seeing different colleagues that actually move between different arms of government and change roles from time to time, who provide that kind of linking fibre between different departments and different services, so that we don't get the silos that sometimes happen in a government program, and really give us that intelligence about what our partner government organisations are up to and how we can work with them to do it well instead of working against each other. So, we've got a good team in here who are really enthusiastic and experienced.
Fantastic. I like also to say, we often hear about the things that don't go so well, and at times, but there are people in there doing a lot of great work as well. It's important to acknowledge that, and it's not easy at times either, doing the sort of things they are with whether it be difficult tenants or other problems in the housing system, or just simply not enough cash to do the things in the way that they like to coming through. So I guess we've all got to work with what we've got.
Yeah, look, absolutely. I think the other bit is, we find ourselves working a lot of the time with the clients and the situations that are most acute, and that rightly takes up a big portion of our time and energy. I think I like checking back in from time to time about the fact that, in a public housing context, we've got X number of people in public housing, and a lot of them are just getting along with their life and not needing extra supports. They're just looking after their family and managing their situation. And then there's a smaller portion that need more assistance for one reason or another. And we need, in our own minds, need to keep checking in about all those people that are just getting on and taking advantage of the support of the housing system. So, yeah.
Yep. And Brent, I know that obviously there's a housing, the agency has strategies, the strategic plans, and of course there's a housing strategy, a homelessness strategy, and a community housing growth strategy now. So there's a lot of strategic work in place. But for you personally, what do you want your legacy to be? And I guess what are some of your goals for your time in this role? What would you be wanting to achieve in your time there?
So I think for me, a big focus is our remote housing construction program. And whilst my team aren't doing the building per se, we work in lockstep with the Department of Infrastructure around identifying where houses should be built, working with the community to figure out the style of housing and the allocation of housing. And then once we get those new houses built, or houses replaced, getting tenants in there. And so one of the things I'm really keen on being able to demonstrate over the next few years is just pulling down that overcrowding number so that we can actually show that we've got more people into better accommodation that meets the needs of their family and allows them to have the foundation they need to be getting on with school, education, getting on with work, and just getting on with building their family in a safe way. So that's a big goal for me, is getting those overcrowding numbers down through good use of those new houses. I think the other thing which I have to mention is we're doing this exciting work around the community housing transition, and there is so much goodwill in the sector around jumping in and having a go at managing more of the housing that's currently in the public housing pool of stock. I think getting those agreements set up in a way that makes sense to the sector, that works for tenants, and will ultimately show better outcomes for the community in those areas as well, is going to be fantastic. So I'm really looking forward to being able to sort of show that success of organisations growing with these stock transfers and not just building up their own kind of internal capability, but the community in that area seeing the positive impact of them being involved. And then I think the last bit is we've got a real focus on staff development at the moment. The agency has had a view, certainly amongst the executive colleagues I work with, that we want to invest a proper chunk in training and development and leadership opportunities for our staff. And we've been really pushing that out to the staff that have joined in from the housing part of our amalgamated agency, making sure they've got access to frontline training that really upskills them in their core roles, making sure that we've got the right specialist training for people that do specialist roles. And one that comes to mind is our public housing safety officers. They need to do some special training to do that work. And then making sure that we've got all of the middle managers and leaders getting a chance to learn more about leadership, both through experience in different roles as leaders, but also through proper theoretical training. And then we're really working on getting mentoring and coaching rolled out so that our staff can access that, self-reflect about how they work and how they want to lead, and then roll that into their work day to day. So that's probably the three things for me: that remote construction delivery, the community housing piece, and the work that we're doing with our staff internally.
Terrific. Now, Brent, as we record this, we've just had estimates hearings yesterday. We do have urban waitlists are on the rise still. Nobody wants to see that happen, obviously. But as I'm just interested in your thoughts around the prospects from here around turning that around. Given we've got, I guess, now a new federal government making noises about having a national housing and homelessness plan. There's some home ownership models being developed as well and being released. We've also got the community housing growth strategy, which will make a difference over time, just to some extent. We don't have like a big philanthropic investor that's just going to throw us an unlimited bucket of money. It costs money to build housing, but there are a number of things happening. Obviously in the territory as well, we've got a new chief minister, which is always interesting to see if her government has slightly different priorities around housing, especially, I guess, noting all the connections with health and education and justice that we talked about before. But I guess more on a national level, and just your sense of where we're at the moment, are you optimistic about the fact we can actually start to make some inroads into reducing homelessness and in what's a very difficult environment at the moment with rising costs of fuel and energy costs and all sorts of other things, CPI, inflation's going up. You seem like an optimistic person and a positive person. Are you feeling optimistic that we can turn this around, this growing problem of homelessness?
Yes, I am. I'm definitely optimistic that there's a number of tools and options that we're going to be able to bring to bear on the situation in the NT. I think everyone's aware from public announcements that the Australian government has committed to a range of things to kind of grow and support the whole housing continuum from one end to the other. I think I think it's worth noting that in those broader commitments, the Northern Territory got specifically mentioned a couple of times. So there's some specific commitments around increasing the support for people who live on homelands. And I think that's really important in a conversation about homelessness, because we're really clear, and I think the sector's probably clear, that people are experiencing homelessness or overcrowding because they're being pushed to move between locations. And the more that we can make homelands living a safe and secure option for people, I think we'll see more people choosing to move back off of urban and remote public housing to go and return to country and live on homeland. So that's going to have a big impact, I truly believe. We've seen examples of this in homelands where we've done upgrade projects. People have come back to live there. They want to live in their traditional country, and that takes some pressure off the other parts of the housing system. We've got an opportunity again that the Australian government has expressed to negotiate an extension to the National Remote Housing Partnership Agreement, and that will mean that we can continue the work of making more accommodation available in remote communities for people that might otherwise be tending to gravitate towards town. And so those two steps take some pressure off of our urban network, which is then going to be supported by other parts of that new program that have committed to support people with affordable housing, and that will feed into our network in our urban centres, and everything we do to increase the total amount of stock that's out there for people to live in, the more that we make it, we make housing accessible. I think that our work next year with the sector around deciding what a new homelessness strategy looks like is going to be informed by some of the things we're learning from the Australian government about these commitments they've made, but also informed by the things that we've learned about ourselves as a system through some of the review work that was done over the last 2 years, some of the things that we learned from our COVID response. And I think I have to acknowledge the great enthusiasm with which the housing sector stepped into what we call the welfare group response and played a really important role in working with people that were vulnerable or homeless in making sure they were safe from COVID. So we've got this new understanding about what works, and I'm sure that if I don't mention this now, you will, the power of an outreach network that actually have the skills but also the flexibility to get out in the field and talk to people where they are staying is really important. It's something I want to see reflected in our new or refreshed strategy for tackling homelessness.
Good stuff. And Brent, just one final question. We've been lucky to have you in the Territory all these years. You made a really massive contribution in a number of different roles, and you bring a lot of ideas and thinking to the table. Hopefully we'll get to see you here for a lot longer. But for those of us who are relatively new to the Territory, like myself, and we hear a lot about these boom-bust cycles, and we hear a lot about the need to diversify our economy and get more housing and local decision-making. Can you visualise that? Can you actually see a future in 10, 20, 30 years' time where we can make really significant inroads in remote housing and jobs in the regions that are more sustainable?
Yeah, I absolutely can. And you accuse me of being eternally optimistic. That's true. But I've lived in the Territory for 37, 38 years now. So I'm not a local, but I've lived here for a little while. I grew up my own children here in the Northern Territory, and I've had the opportunity to move around and live in different parts. I lived out in Arnhem Land, lived over in Groote Island. I've had a couple of opportunities to live down in Central Australia and in the Big Rivers region, and we absolutely see different parts of the Territory go through cycles where not just economic cycles, but also I think cycles of community coherence and strength of leadership. So we have times where we've got really strong local community leadership, and we absolutely make leaps and bounds in terms of getting those communities locked in with new programs, responding well to things that already exist, and being able to map out their future, because they've got those people that can walk the leadership journey with government and the NGO sector. And then at other times, those people just aren't around yet, or the people that were leading have maybe moved on or sometimes passed away, and we just have a gap before the next people step in. But those gaps are always filled. There's always someone else that comes forward. We've got an amazing group of people in the local communities that have got the skills, experience, education, cultural knowledge to lead for their people and to communicate with government. We've got some amazing CEOs in our non-government and partner organisations that hold us accountable, but they also know how to negotiate with us to get a good outcome for both government and the provider. And I think about some of the times I've spent in Tennant Creek negotiating with the Jalala Curry crowd, just as an example. They've got a really strong organisation. It's had its ups and downs, but they've got leadership in there. They've got a strong, they've got strong long-term community members in their organisation who are speaking the vision they've got, and they're getting there. They're negotiating local decision-making agreements, getting government to the table, and starting to win opportunities for their community. So, yeah, I absolutely do see that it's a cycle. It's not just economic. It's also about leadership and sort of human capital in the different places. But it's there, and the next generation's coming through. And like I say, my own kids have gone to school up here and stayed in the Territory, and plenty of other people's children are doing the same thing, becoming young adults and sharing what they've got with the community by staying here and living here and enjoying it.
So, Brent, I think that's really positive to hear. And we know very well, don't we, that we've got some real challenges with rough sleeping and visitors and a lack of housing. And we certainly don't want housing to be holding us back from realising those aspirations. So very much look forward to working with you and your team and our members, thinking how can we get some solutions to some of these challenges and ultimately get more housing than we had last year and the year before that. So, Brent, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the program. Thanks for joining us on the couch. And you've been listening to Brent Warren, who's the Deputy CEO of Territory Families Housing Operations. So, Brent, thanks again for joining us. And do go onto our YouTube channel and check it out if you've missed any of this broadcast, and keep tuned for the next ones coming through. So we'll leave it at that. Thanks again, Brent, and all the best.
Cheers.
Cheers. See you, mate.